Welcome back to episode 7 of Data Mesh TV. This is a milestone show for us. A milestone show because I've got some of my favorite colleagues from Starburst joining the show. And so when we started this, I said, I can't wait till we get Colleen and Andy on. It took me a little bit to warm up. It took me a little bit to kind of raise my my own proficiency, if you will, in doing these shows before I could bring these professionals on. And so we're really excited today to do a couple of things. One is to get to know the group. I think it's going to be a lot of fun talking with them. But most importantly, we're going to introduce Data Mesh for Dummies book. This is a book that we've just released. We'll offer you a link so that you can get a copy. It isn't meant to replace the Bible, if you will, Jamac's great book that describes the data mesh in detail. But what we're trying to do, and what I think we've done, I hope you'll agree, a pretty good job at, is trying to summarize all the key points that I think are important for anyone that is just starting their learning path on data mesh. It's a guide that you start with. You might read it on the airplane, and it kind of gives you everything you need to know before you dig in deeper. It's a guide that you start with before you start having conversations with peers on why this might be important for your conversation. It might even be the guide that you start with right before you get started to make sure you haven't missed something in the data mesh implementation you're about to jump into. So without any further wait, let's jump right into the show. Colleen, Andy, welcome to the show.
Hi.
Hey, fantastic. Hey, so let's I want to start with just a bit of a funny story, or let's help me out with the funny story, because it's been really interesting writing a book with 3 people. I think writing a book for anyone, I would imagine, is really hard, but writing a book with 3 people and then writing a book with 3 people that have very different opinions, I think is very difficult. Each of us brings a different background. I know, Andy, your background is a broad background, but from a book perspective, we really leaned on you for that architecture view, that hardcore, that expertise on data mesh architecture. And then Colleen, we leaned on you for your data leadership experience from a data analytics perspective. What are teams actually doing? What's really going on behind the scenes? And I came in with a CDO view. And so you've got a CDO, a data analytics leader, and an architecture thought leader coming together to bring not only what they've learned by watching other videos and reading other books, but more importantly, I would say what we've learned by dealing with customers, what we've learned with our real life experiences. We bring all that together into 16 pages. And then somebody thought it would be a good idea for us to collaborate. Let's talk about that collaboration. How fun has this experience been for you, Andy and Colleen?
It's been a joy.
I would use the word chaos.
Yeah.
Chaos.
Yes. Yeah. Chaos, and then iterating towards something that is pretty cool, actually, and pretty concise, and I think pretty useful. But chaos certainly at the beginning.
And I mean, it's a challenge because we each have differing opinions about some things, and so we had to come together to find that common messaging that we think will be most useful for the reader. And I think we've done that, but it definitely took some iteration.
Absolutely. Who do you think won the most arguments, right? Who was, because we argued, and I think arguments are fantastic. Who won all the arguments? I think Colleen won. And what do you think, Andy?
So I think I ramble on a lot, and then you guys kind of listen, and then I go to sleep in the UK time zone, and you guys just do what you want in American time zone because I'm asleep. Yeah. So I think pretty much probably Colleen.
I was going to say Andy. I think Andy won a lot of these arguments because Andy... he's got very thoughtful debating style, which is good. Yeah,
he's a patient debater. Talking about Andy, who do we think complained the most?
Definitely Andy.
Oh. Yes. No, I'm not gonna bother answering that.
All right. Let's jump right into it. Let's talk a bit more about the data mesh. And what I want to talk and where I want to start the conversation is, and I think more and more so, if you look at what's out there and you look at organizations that are maturing in their data mesh journey, what we're realizing is that it's all about the data product. At the end of the day, there's a lot to get right, and there's a lot to work on, there's a lot to fix, but you really need to start with a really good understanding for that data product. You really need to understand with a firm alignment, if you will, with that domain team, with those data product teams on the data product. And so, Colleen, this is an area that you probably dream about data products when you go to sleep at night. You do this so much. You're the expert. You're the person we go to when we want to talk about data products. Talk to us a little bit about the chapter on data products in this book, and not only why it's important, but your views on data products as a whole.
Yeah, I think you said it well, that data products are absolutely the heart of the data mesh. And that's frankly what drew me to the data mesh in the first place. I've seen organizations touting this idea of data-driven strategy and data-driven decision-making for years. And yet they still treat data as essentially a byproduct of business. And so the idea of data products is just that. Data is a first-class product of your business and should be treated as such, just like any other product the business creates. And that's how you really embrace data-driven strategy. So really, what does data as a product mean? It means that the data should be curated and presented with the consumer in mind. And that's exactly what that second pillar of the data mesh is all about. And so when I read that, I was like, yes, this is it. We finally are here. Data products are created with the end user and the business in mind, which means that they're well curated, they're discoverable, they're paired with lots of relevant metadata that makes them a whole product, and they're secure. And that means that end users don't have to be experts in data pipelines and databases or write code to get to the data that's meaningful to them. And ideally, they can discover data within some sort of catalog and then use that data product with whatever tool works for them, whether it be SQL or a BI tool or Python or whatever you have.
Absolutely. You know, and Andy, let me let you go first. What would you like to add to that?
So I would wholeheartedly agree with everything. I guess the thing that I would add is
it doesn't happen often. Andy doesn't always.
I know.
Well, okay. Let me say,
agree.
I agree, and now I'm going to add some. So what I would say is, so if we think about the way we've talked about data in the past, we've talked about data being, a number of records or a size, and we've all been proud of, I've got this much data in my warehouse or this much data in my lake. And I think when we think about a product, it's I've got this many people using my thing. I've got this many people saying cool things about my data product. And I think even that sort of change in language has significant implications for the rest of the way we sort of treat data in a business. And so just thinking about it in a very different way, that I'm measuring my data product, or I'm measuring my data, I should say, in a different way. I think that has just really large, really interesting and cool implications to as I say, the way we've kind of considered it before.
What I find really interesting about data products is that I think a lot of the conversations that I've heard so far are on the technology side of data products. But I think, as Colleen said, we're focused on the consumers. And I tell this story, I find it really interesting. I said that, there's no such thing as a perfect data product. What I mean by that is, and I remember listening to a presentation where an organization was walking through their data product development. And it was really impressive, except that it took them 4 months to build that first data product. And I'm thinking, is it 4 months? Shouldn't it be 4 weeks or 4 days or 4 hours, right? I think the speed at which you create a data product is really, really important. The TCO, the total cost of ownership, what it costs you to create and iterate on a data product is really important. But going back to the story, if it takes you 4 months to create one, I guarantee you when you take it to that consumer, we've all been there, they're going to say, that's not right. You're not going to get it right. You got the wrong location field, or it's impossible almost to get it right the first time. It's impossible to get it right the second time. What's fantastic is if you are able to move fast and build a small data product in a couple of days, or if you've got all the data already connected in the back end, maybe a couple of hours, and then you take it to that consumer and say, is that what you wanted? Don't be surprised. Expect them to say, no, you're missing this, you're missing that. When you can sit there in front of them, and that's bragging a little bit about Starburst, but when you can sit there in front of them and adjust a query or make a tweak and say, is that what you're looking for? That's the moment, right? And I think that's what we're talking about when we talk about data products. It's not just the notion of being able to give somebody a product that they recognize and understand. It's also the ability to iterate and change and develop quicker. At the end of the day, this is about agile delivery, speed of delivery. And I think that part of the data product to me is the most exciting. We should talk more about it.
Absolutely. And I think, you really hit the nail on the head there with it's agile, it's engineering practices, right? I would never develop a UI without doing some research and checking out, from a design standpoint, what the end user will do with it and what they'll think about, right? And so it's exactly the same thing. You need product owners, you need product managers, you need, engineering management. You need all of these things that we have around engineering for other products. We need it around data products as well. And the nice thing is you don't need a separate organization necessarily. You can have those same engineers working on data as a product as well.
So I may disagree there. Sorry,
All right,
sorry to jump in. I may disagree though, because that's the way this works. So I think I've seen organisations who have adopted. Coffee has just arrived. Do apologise. This is how you know it's live. The idea of building a curated data set or a curated data product, I think, is where we want to get to. There's some material in Jamak's book which I would have loved to expand on, and maybe will in kind of future material around things like source and consumer aligned data products. And the reason I bring this up is because that sort of, let's say, 4-hour data product, probably a source aligned data product. It's probably, let's just get a data product out there. Let's get some feedback. Let's get some usage. Let's get some feedback from, qualitative and quantitative feedback from the folks that are using it. Let's iterate that very, very quickly towards a consumer data product. And I think that kind of interplay between allowing us to build those source data products or source aligned data products and then iterating them to a consumer aligned data product very quickly. I think there's a lot of kind of power in that. And we may keep those source aligned data products, for future reference. And it may be that we have a number of consumer aligned data products that we iterate from them over time to meet different requirements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's definitely, we talk about MVPs all the time in engineering, right? Like that's exactly what it is. You just need that first version that you can then iterate on. And it's probably not the best version, but I like that it took us about 9 minutes for you to start disagreeing with me.
It's coming.
Pretty standard. That was actually pretty good.
Well, we have a whole chapter dedicated in the book to data products, and I think we didn't start there. I think we went through a couple of iterations thinking about how to discuss it. Initially, I think it had just a couple of pages, and ended up with a whole chapter, and I feel good about it. And so, some of the points we're talking about are in the book. If we wrote a book on data products, it might be 400 pages as long as Zamak's current book. But I think the point of writing a summary is to give you guys the principles. What I'll say here, and then we'll move on to the next topic, is I don't think there's a hard set of rules that any company can pick up and apply consistently. I think what we're talking about in the book are a set of principles that you can think about. And if you select a set of principles, I would also tell you, I don't know that you apply them the same way to every domain. You're going to have some domains with very stable data products. They don't change often. They work the same way all the time. And you're going to have domains where the competitive need, if you will, the drive for that domain is going to be ideation, right? The need and the want and the competitive absoluteness, so to speak, to actually change very, very quickly. And so in those types of domains, now we're talking about 4-minute data products. And other kinds of domains, we might be talking about the 4-month one. So it varies by your consumer, varies by your business name. But you hinted on something a second ago, Andy. You started talking about the things that we didn't put in the book. I know you got a long list. I think you said you had 8 items. This is a 30-minute show, Andy, so we now have, but I want to highlight them. One is we didn't get them in the book, but 2, it might be something we capture maybe as an addendum to the book down the road. But let's talk about some of those things you wish we could have had. It's the book, by the way, for anybody that hasn't picked it up yet. It's written 2-point font, and we have 2-millimeter margins. And that's as small as we could do it, right? So we could not add any more content. I'm joking, by the way. We couldn't add any more content in the book. Andy, what did we miss?
What we didn't want to do is we didn't want to just regurgitate Jamak's book, because Jamak's book is, it's a really concise book, and there's an awful lot of really great, valuable stuff in there. So the things that I would have loved to have put in were things like data literacy. Well, if I think about it in a list, and I think about with respect to domains first, I think about things like data literacy, data enablement, and how that impacts the adoption of kind of the principles of mesh. And I think there's quite a lot in that space. If you're not a particularly literate organization as with regards to data, then is kind of data mesh for you. And then the other aspect that I would just pick up on domains, which I think is coming up more and more, is that the adoption of data mesh is really a significant cultural change to an organization. And how do we motivate and incentivize people to adopt the practices that we want them to adopt? And so how do we think about what are the technical capabilities that are needed, and then what are the actual kind of systems and maybe routines, rituals, stories, the things that we talk about to each other, which enable data product development to occur in the quickest way? You know, how do we motivate people to build those data products, and then how do we incentivize and motivate people to kind of give feedback on those data products so that they can iterate and become better and better over time? So they're kind of a couple of the ideas that I would love to explore in more words.
Preach.
You know,
there's so much there, Andy. I think let me pause and encourage the audience to rewind at this point and replay that part, because you put you leave a lot of gold nuggets there, so to speak, diamonds, if you will, jewels in the messaging that I think we could write a whole other book about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's why we need a lot more pages. So I'll skip over kind of some of my thoughts on data products, because we've touched on data products in the first part of this. So self-service infrastructure. So something when I'm asked to speak on sort of data mesh, one of the things that I think is really important, Shamek touches on it, but I'd love to see more, is interoperability of technology. So, you know, it's in a data mesh, you're bound to have a number of different technology platforms, whether they're data or what I would call compute engines. And so you don't really want the overhead and the burden of synchronizing metadata, synchronizing security policies. So interoperability as it pertains to enabling a self-service foundation for data mesh, I think is something that we need to think about much more. And there's a lot to be written there. And then if I think about just another very top level thing, security. So if we think about the traditional model out there, the role-based access control, where we're kind of assigning policies to people or roles or groups, I would contend that doesn't really work in a data mesh. And I think you really need to move more towards like an ABAC type approach, where you're using attributes and you're attaching attributes maybe to pieces of data, and then somewhere else you're assigning policies to those attributes. So we could say an address column in a data product, we could tag it as PII as an example. And then somewhere there's a policy that says if this is PII, then it's hashed or it's whatever. But
so hard to do that. So hard to do.
Yeah.
It is, but I think the technologies will, I think technologies are going to get there pretty quick.
I'm with you. I think they will get there. They're not there yet. Because I know I looked at policy-based access and attribute-based access for a couple of years in my past life, so to speak. And it was, I didn't see anything out there that we could use yet, but I do think they're coming. And when they get here, the idea of being able to create policies around data products, so that you don't have to create all these granular rules, you create broader policies that you can audit and that you can manage. That's going to make things even faster and even smoother. I will say that in some organizations that are already trying to do that in small circles, you have a small team and you write some basic policies. I think you could already start to see that it can work. It's trying to do that across the enterprise. I think that we're still waiting on a bigger technology for.
So I'd agree with that. But I suspect there's people who are listening to this or maybe watching the recording who are kind of spitting into their coffee saying, role-based access control is the future. No. I think there's some.
Nobody's saying that.
Well, you'd be surprised. I think there's some kind of words that I would love to get down in a further book with some worked examples on kind of how this kind of works. Yeah. And then the other piece, which is always interesting for discussion and debate, the aspects around federated computational governance. I think there's probably books to be written in this space. And I think if I just pick the computational piece, I think when I see a lot of people talk about data mesh, they talk about federated governance, and they kind of miss that word in the middle. And I think the reason for that is because it's hard. Are
you talking about me? You're talking about me, right?
I'm just saying, anyone who's on a data mesh presentation and they see the fourth principle and it doesn't have the word computational in, just look out for those guys.
All right, I'm guilty.
So I think there's a lot to be said about this, and a lot to be said about kind of implementation approaches and strategies for how we can achieve that computational piece. And for me, that computational piece is really about, automation of those rules that we've defined. So, does our data product have policies associated with it? If it doesn't, we're not publishing it, right? That's a simple test. Does our data policy, does a column in a data set, does it conform to a standard 3 characters, 5 letters, or whatever the thing is? Does all of the data in that column conform? And if it doesn't, then we're not letting you publish, right? These are automated tests. And I've seen some organizations already sort of develop what I would call manual approaches to this. Then they've kind of scripted them into some level of automation, using sort of very much a unit test approach. So I think there's some thoughts and interesting ideas there that, again, I'd love to spend a bit more time thinking about and a bit more time kind of writing about. And then
I'm gonna pause you, Andy, because I'm
okay.
afraid we're on item 5 or 8.
I've got one more. I'll be quick.
Right,
Can I do one more? Right, because this will generate a little bit of entertainment. So the last one I'll say is races. Right.
That was fine.
So I think that whole roles responsibilities. And the reason I think, for those on the listening in, the reason I think this is entertaining is because that's one of the points where we had quite a lot of debate and discussion.
And
there were lots of different viewpoints on on that whole area. So another area for lots of words.
No, I think the roles and responsibilities is definitely the thing that it hurt the most to cut. And I mean, I think we started with like 37 times more content than we needed in this book, right? And then we had to just rip things out. And there were some things that I was like, yeah, that's less essential. I get that. We can leave that for later discussion, or, Andy can write a blog about it or whatever. But the roles and responsibilities was the most challenging thing to cut, because I really deeply feel that this is what sets the data mesh aside, right? Like, it makes it different in that it's a socio-technical approach, and it understands that you have to reorganize the structure of your people around this data mesh journey. And again, it's a journey, and you might not have people assigned to these roles, like specific people. You might not have someone whose entire job is data product owner, but you might eventually. And it depends where you are in your journey. And so I think there's multiple races that we could create, one for just getting started and one for a more mature mesh world. And, we have so many thoughts and feelings on this. And yes, we had a lot of fights, and there was cake thrown at one point, but there was cake thrown. But yeah, I definitely think that roles and responsibilities are something that, maybe we write that book.
I will just to add one little piece of that. The story here is I put a racy diagram together and I showed it to my colleagues, and they hated it. And I still use a diagram with some changes, but the first thing I tell our customers when we put it up in front of them, we consult on the racy diagram, is here's a starting point for the conversation. I think that for every organization, you don't take here's what it has to look like. Rather, you walk in there and say, here are the things we have to do. Now, let's look at your organization. Let's look at who's already doing some of these things, and let's figure out how we line them up. What does the data product owner do? Well, here's some ideas. Let's talk about how we can apply it. Who's going to take the data? That's probably the part we argued about the most. Who's going to be the data product owner? I would love for it to be someone closer to the business. My colleagues corrected me and said, no, Adrian, you have to have somebody closer to IT. I think it's somewhere in the middle. And with all the companies I've talked to, I've seen mostly IT, to be fair, to compliment you guys, but I have seen a couple of organizations on the pharma side, for example, where you're starting to really empower and enable teams that normally wouldn't have that access. Now they're starting to figure it out. Now they're starting to do their own. So I think we can get there, but we're not there now for sure. So fantastic conversation. Colleen, let me give you a chance. Was there anything else that you want to comment on that you think that we missed before we go to the next topic?
It's fun because we do have 10 takeaways at the end, and it was really hard to think of what are the 10 things, right? And it was supposed to be 10, and we wanted it to be 10. It's a nice even number, but I found that it either was going to be 900 or 3, right? Like we couldn't land on 10, and we worked on that a lot. And I think that I think we landed on a good set of the basics, and I feel good about where we landed, but that was a really challenging thing. So I think the main message of this is a journey. You have to figure out what's right to you, but here are the basics, and here's what a data mesh is. I'm really proud of where we landed. I think we worked well together in the end. I think we did a good job.
I'm going to say this now before I forget to say it later. For the audience, and I think hopefully for anyone that picks up the book and reads it, I hope that you recognize we're here and available, right? We love to talk about data mesh. Yeah. So we have conversations with organizations every day about data mesh. And so if you're going through the 10 takeaways and you say, hey, they didn't go deep enough into that topic, I want to hear more about the racy. I want to hear more about all that stuff Andy shared with us. Reach out to us, right? That's what we're here for. That's what we get paid to do, so to speak, is help organizations think through their data mesh designs. I'm going to add my 2 pieces, and then we'll go to the last topic before we close. I do think I would have really have liked to focus more on strategy. I think it's a different book, and maybe we write a data mesh strategy for dummies. But with any transformational exercise, there's a part of the organization that's focused on building the kit, if you will, building the data mesh, right? Getting it working. And there's a lot that we've talked about in the book. We're talking about building it and operating it. Then there's another side of the organization that's really trying to figure out how to exploit it. How am I going to squeeze every ounce of value out of the data mesh? That's the strategic side. I think there's a lot that we should start to talk about just in terms of strategic delivery, strategic alignment. How can the data mesh help me drive real business outcomes? Those are parts that maybe didn't fit in this book, but I hope we can come back to cover those later. Maybe I'll leave it at that before we run out of time. Last topic, and then and just so you guys know, we're roughly got about 5 or 6 minutes before we close. I wanted to kind of get your thoughts on the community, right? And so there's a lot of dialogue, so to speak, that we've had on the book and so forth. What would you say that's different about this book than maybe other books that are out there? And so we're not trying to replace the Mike's book. I think all of us are great fans of what's written there. That's first and foremost. There's a lot of great books out there as well, a lot of great videos. But we set out to do something different. And I think each of us had a vision for why this was going to be valuable in the marketplace. So let me just start with you, Colleen, and give your thoughts on what do you think is different about this book and maybe what's already out there.
I mean, it's shorter. I think you can actually, that is actually the crux of it, is that you can read it in one sitting. Like you said, you can take it on a flight with you and power through it, and you could read it and you can not become an expert on the intricacies of data mesh because it is an intricate topic. But I do think that it's a consumer-focused summary of what all the hype is about, why data mesh is important, and what differentiates it from other data management strategies that are out there. And then it does touch upon, like, what are the first few things you need to think about to implement it. So I think it's a very action-focused guide, but it also, I mean, it's a high-level summary. It's 16 pages or something, but, you know, Zhamak's book is the Bible, right, for this. And so, you know, we're not trying to replace it or summarize it. This is not the Cliff's Notes for that, but it is a companion, and it is something that you can, if you want to come up to speed quickly, I think that's important. And like you said, it's an incredible community. I love the data mesh community. There's so many conversations that happen in Slack and and so, yeah, I think it's a good way of summarizing where we are right now, but making it action focused and getting people up to speed quickly.
Andy, what are your thoughts?
Well, Colleen said a lot. That's my initial thought. But I think the action focus bit. I think. So yeah, you can go right away and read Zhamak's book, and you'll become an expert. And you sort of sit down and think about and reflect on that. I think with our book, if you've got a meeting tomorrow with your manager, and he's sort of saying, "I would like to know about this data mesh and why we're not doing it," you could pick up our book, you could read, and you could sound like an expert for that meeting, and that would get you through. So but and then obviously you could determine if you want to go and look at all the other pieces of collateral out there, of which there are many. There's practices around data mesh, and there's the data mesh learning community on Slack, etc. So there's a lot of other places, but I think this is exactly as Colleen said. It's something that's easy to consume, fast, gets you up to speed with kind of the what I would suggest you probably need to know. And then it gives you enough to figure out actually if you want to go that next step and sort of envelop yourself into this whole space and sort of sit in a darkened room and read all the material and never come out, which is how I spend my weekends.
Fantastic. Let me bring a couple of those points together, because I like, Colleen, what you said around focusing on the consumer. I think that's really important. What I would say is different about this book is I don't think in an organization, if I sit down and I'm starting a data mesh transformation, I don't need everyone in the room to be an expert on the book. That's not going to work, right? There's only one expert on the whole book, and it's Zhamak, right? And so I think what I do want, if I'm driving a big transformation exercise, is I want everyone in the room to understand their part. And so if your part is data products, you need to be the expert on data products. If your part is domains, you have to be the expert on domains. If your part is the attribute-based access, that's your expertise. And so what the book does, I think, is it gives everyone in that room a foundation. Let's all make sure that we start with a basic understanding for the data mesh principles. You may not read the whole book. We hope you do. But if you're not going to, this is a great companion guide, right? Once you've read the companion and once you have the conversation, then you can pick the chapters in the book you need to go study, right? You're going to be data products, go focus on that chapter. You want to be domains, go focus on that chapter. And I think that allows people a faster entry into where to start reading from a book perspective if they don't want to read the whole thing. Everyone has a different level of expertise. This is a great way to figure out where you need to start. Colleen, Andy, I wish we had more time. This was fantastic. We got to bring you guys on again. Like I said, just so you guys know, this was a milestone show for me to have you on Data Mesh TV. And I'm so grateful to work with you. And I'm so happy to have you on the show. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you for having us.
There you have it. Episode 7 of Data Mesh TV with Colleen Tarto and Andy Mott. We came together to write a book, right? And so we wanted to hopefully help you understand that this is really about accelerating your learning path, right? This isn't your full learning path, right? As Andy said, you're not going to get everything in the summary. You're going to hopefully get all the key pieces that are important for you to get started on that longer learning journey. We brought together a data analytics leader in Colleen. We brought Andy Mott, an architecture leader, and we brought myself, a former CDO, together to write a book about data mesh. Each of us brought different elements to the book, and I hope that those will come across as you read them. Whether you're a CDO or an architect or a data analytics leader, there's something in this book for you. 16 pages, it's not 2-point font. And I hope when you get through the book, I hope that you'll capture one of our key intentions, which was to help you embrace data products. Most of the book is focused on data products, and I think all of us should really start focusing on that for all the reasons we discussed today. We could have had a 30-minute show just on data products. Last but not least, one more thing that we didn't include in the book, but I always remind teams is start small. If you're thinking about data mesh, if you're not sure how to get started, let's have that conversation. You want to start small. You want to run fast. You can get some quick wins with an agile data mesh approach. And so don't wait any longer. Pick up the book, get your foundation going, give us a call, and we'll get started in helping you on your data mesh journey. Thanks for your time. Hope to see you back for episode 8.